Coming to you from Orange County, California, this is the Jug Life Podcast with Max Ada and Chad Wesley Smith.
Sure thing.
Hey everybody, what is up? Chad Wesley Smith here, continuing from the fine state of Georgia. I'm joined today by University of Georgia throws coach, Don Babbitt. Don, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing very good.
And, I got to tell a story just to start things off to kind of contextualize this whole thing for everyone. Because this, I think, says so much about who you are as a person and as a coach. It was my freshman year, and I have no idea if you even remember this, but my freshman year, Nate Rolfe and I, freshman year at Cal, and we were redshirting.
Yep.
And we threw at Mount Sac as unattached. And we had this thing that we called team unattached. We got matching uniforms to throw unattached, and they were very revealing, very short type of things. But after we threw, it was time for the Javelin, and we wandered up into the stands. And Nate and I, being young but big fans of throwing, we knew who all the coaches were, and of course knew who you were, and you were coaching Bro Greer, American record holder in the Javelin. And we saw you there, and we're just kind of like, well, let's just see if we can sit with Coach Babbitt and talk to him. And while Bro threw this incredible series, 6 throws over 80 meters, if I remember right, 2 over 87.
Yep.
Incredible series. We got to sit there with you, his coach, while you just told us everything that was going on, everything about his technique and his training, his throw by throw. This really incredible analysis, and you're always like my favorite coach to talk to, because I was telling my girlfriend this earlier. I was like, we are about to nerd out on throwing numbers like no one else can. And one of the first times I was told about you was by Art Venegas, of course. Yeah. And he does his little impression of you, and talking about, Don knows every number for every thrower and their jumps and their lifts and all that stuff. So, that was a really cool moment for me as a young thrower, and I appreciate that. I appreciate that a ton. So let's run down a little bit the roster of Don Babbitt. We had Bro Greer, who we already mentioned.
Yes.
American record holder in the Javelin, right? About 88 meters, somewhere in there.
He's at 91.29 now.
Okay.
At the time when we were talking about him, it was like 87.69, I believe. He broke it a few times. So.
Yeah. And then my guest earlier today, 2012 bronze medalist in the Olympics in the shot put, Reese Hoffa. 2004 gold medalist, Adam Nelson. Jenny Dahlgren, Andres Hosklis.
Yeah. Jason Tunks, got to work with him for a bit in the discus throw. It was quite a long list, you know. It's hard to go through. You worry about leaving people out and things like that. But, the young man working with Denzel Comenencia right now, who did the double at NCAAs last year in about a 5-hour span, he's going to be another. He's already very good, but I think he's going to be the next kind of world scene type of guy.
And I'm a little bit out of the loop these days. What events is he?
He's a hammer and shot put.
Okay.
So, which is kind of a unique double.
Yeah.
I think he was telling about a list that he saw where he might be the best shot hammer doubler in the history of the world, which he's about 23 years old. That's pretty high up for that young of age, especially for those events where usually you're at your best, in your late 20s, early 30s.
Yeah, so I'd mentioned to Reese earlier a kind of aha moment for me thinking about training for the throws and how I trained for the throws, or maybe how I should have trained for the throws, was I stopped throwing when I was 23 or 24. And a little bit before that, or right around that time, I saw a chart that you had about Reese that took from his freshman year at Georgia through the year that he threw his PR, I believe.
Yeah,
so
2007, yeah.
Yeah, covering 8-9 years.
Actually, that was probably 11 years, because he actually improved 11 straight years in a row as PR, which is kind of hard to do.
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah. And it had his lifts and his jumps and his throws and overhead back and stand throw and all different weights and all this stuff. And I'm looking at this thing at 22 years old, throwing about 1950 at the time, but this huge stand throw and big lifts. And I was like, man, I can bench more, and I can squat more, and I can jump higher, and I can jump farther, and run faster, and stand throw further. I do all the things on there better, except the one that mattered, except the one that was the sport. And this goes to the bigger idea of general strength and specific strength and technique and timing, of course, and all that. So, what do you feel is strong enough, or the role of general strength and general strength explosive qualities for the thrower?
It's hard to say, but it's also easier to say. But I was trying to figure out a good way to put this. Is I look at throwing, for example. Think of throwing as a skill, as in hitting a golf ball is a skill, and so it's not, when you look at something, maybe like a bench press, for example, it's a fairly simple movement. A lot of the body parts are kind of fixed. You're really only working 15% of your body, really, if you're doing a very strict bench press. Whereas a drive in golf or a stand throw, let alone a full spin or a hammer throw for that matter, those are very, very complex movements. So there is all kinds of little things. And I had a conversation with Koji Morifushi about this, and he brought it up this way in the hammer. He goes, there's 197 different parts in the throw where you can get better. It's like you can get centimeters out of 197 different areas. So obviously, being explosive and strong is important. You're not going to see a medalist that's not explosive or strong, but that covers probably 50 of the 197 parts. So there's lots of little ways to extract distance that have to do with coordination of explosive parts. And so that's, when you look at something like weightlifting, for example, it's a fairly linear event. Even the Olympic lifts, what's the doc squats, first rule, what goes down must come up. It's up, it's down, it's kind of linear. That stuff's important, but being able to move in many different directions in a coordinated fashion all at once is very different. I guess another analogy would be weightlifting is kind of like drag racing, and it's very much about explosion at the start and getting the thing moving, and throwing is more like Formula One driving. There's explosion, there's quickness, but there's skill navigating the turns, and so that's what's probably the most important, what separates the very, very top throwers from the good throwers. And I do think in the men's shot, for example, a number like 19 to 20 meters, I think there's a lot of different ways to get there. You can be small and quick and extremely coordinated, but not that strong. Or it can be tremendously huge and strong, but not that coordinated, and you can still get to 20. But when you get to 21 meters, especially 22, now the whole package comes together. There's a lot of people that can shoot 85 in golf, but very few that can shoot 63. You really, that's more than luck, It's so. I think that's kind of my long-winded answer right there. This is kind of what's going on there.
So, and in developing those other 150 points, what do you see the role of like special strength training? That was something, looking back on my career, I was like, man, I had these really high general qualities, but did not dedicate enough time to special strength development. Obviously, the number one thing, probably didn't dedicate enough time to throwing the shot put. Yeah. But from a Bondarchuk's ideas about special strength training, is that something that you include a lot?
Yeah, definitely. And the thing with special strength is the best exercises. I'm kind of quoting some of the top German coaches here, or paraphrasing them. The best special strength exercise, or the best strength exercises, are the ones that mimic the throw the most. So let's say we're talking about the shot put, for example. A heavy stand throw with an 8K or a 9K ball on the men's side, or a 5K ball on the women's side, that's probably your best special strength exercise. And some people might say, well, that's just throwing. It's like, well, yeah, it's throwing, but you're throwing heavy. Or you're gliding, but with a weight vest on. You're doing pretty much the exact movement. You just have a little bit more resistance than normal. So let me turn the gravity up a little bit on you. We can't really do that, but we can put weight vests on and do other stuff to simulate that concept. So these things have the most transfer. If you look at Bondarchuk's book and you look at the different methods of transfer and what transfers and stuff, you'll see the heavy throwing or the light throwing has the highest transferability. something like the squat, for example, may have certain transfer at some parts of the career, and then later on in the career, for example, then it loses
like
its applicability.
A high dynamic correspondence to a 17-meter thrower.
Yeah.
Extremely high, but then at 21 meters, it goes down a lot while the overweight shots increase.
Go way up, exactly. And same thing for the hammer and discus and whatnot. So, but the special strength, a lot of that too is just doing the movement with a little bit more resistance than normal. You just get better at it, and that's how you kind of. I know I'm putting it real simply, but you sort of synthesize the strength and the intermuscular coordination, because that's the one thing that probably is most important for developing special strength in the throws, is developing not necessarily the recruitment, or having to do with hypertrophy. It's intramuscular coordination.
And then the neural efficiency of that.
Yes, exactly. And you just have to do that with repetition, and that's part of the reason why throwers peak out, if you look, or reach their peak. I won't say peak out, but reach their peak in their late 20s, early 30s. The one that probably potentially reaches the max, the earliest, is Javelin. That's one of those things where, like, you either got a great arm or you don't, kind of, so to speak.
And it's Javelin probably the most destructive to the body.
Most destructive, too. I kind of think it's kind of like being a pitcher, if you got a 103-mile-an-hour fastball, you usually don't have a 20-year career with that. At the end of the career, you're starting to go into like the change up and the knuckleball and developing stuff that's not so explosive. So that's the same thing with the javelin. There's almost a fixed time. If you're good young, you finish kind of young. If you get good late, then you stay a little bit longer.
Now, with special strength exercises, and I think when you mentioned that you're saying it simply, I think that's perfect, because I think it is, a lot of it is simple. It is more intuitive than people want to. They want to make it more complex and kind of fancy without just realizing, like, the more it looks like the throw, the more it's going to help.
It's that simple.
But do you find that there are issues with, like, technical disruption?
Yes.
In using special strength?
Yeah, I as you were setting up the question, I was just kind of putting together in my head going, there's what you have to be very careful of, and usually as a coach, you really have to watch your athletes with this, is you have to stop them from kind of cheating the system, meaning will they adjust their technique with a heavy implement to get more distance? Because more distance usually shows that, hey, I'm getting better. But maybe you're not getting better, you're just getting better at getting the result, but you're not getting the training effect that you want. So you need to maintain the technique and pattern that's going to come back and be suitable for the competition implement. Everything has to be able to come back and go back to the competition implement. And you can see this with a wide variety of throwers. The ones that you can see throwers in a hammer throw that train really heavy naturally, that's their thing. Then when they go to the regulation ball, they kind of have heavy hammer technique. And conversely, you can see throwers, especially guys maybe in high school, that threw really far with that 12-pound ball doing certain things, and they get in the 16 and it's just not going. And you look at that and go, well, they have no horsepower. I don't know, is it lack of pure horsepower, or is it lack of coordination and timing with a heavier ball? That's a different thing, and you have to understand the difference so you can approach the problem to figure out how to get them to throw the 16 farther. So
and I think with people manipulating their technique to fit the special exercise, that happens in powerlifting, that happens in weightlifting, where someone who's it might be great at a snatch from blocks. Or at a board press. But they're board pressing to board press. They're not board pressing to train the lockout of their bench press. They're snatching from blocks to snatch from blocks, not to train the position from above the knee. And that was something, being a really good stand thrower in it. My PR ended up being 20.00 meters, and I think my stand throw that day was probably about 1835. Horrible conversion, but I was always very mindful, and I don't remember if it was from hearing a seminar, a little like clinic video with you or with Adam or Reese or something, but it was one of you, and you're talking about, the stand throw is not a stand throw, it's the front of the ring. And that I was always trying to be mindful of, like, I'm just trying to do what I do at the front of the ring here, not, lean over real far and stand throw for the sake of stand throwing. But I think that's definitely a trap that people can fall into with the special exercise stuff, is getting good at that for the sake of getting good at it, or doing things that they would be better served. And I don't know that this is problematic for throwing, because it's very simple to add weight to the implement and do the throw. Where you get football players or basketball players, they try and like overload, or they do a sporting movement and they think it's a special strength exercise, but there's no overload to it like there is with the heavy shot or weight vest.
Yeah, it's tough. It's really tricky. You always need to be reassessing what you're doing and making sure you're not working on something that's not going to help you. Even though your intentions are good and you're trying to, you always have to constantly reassess your training. And your body type changes too, is over time, of course. And then the way you move in your given sport, it's going to change over time as you mature. So you always have to go back and reassess. And that's hard to do because it's so easy to want to write a basic plan and just work really hard at it and say, I'm going to get good results because I worked really hard at this plan. That doesn't guarantee you anything. You always have to go back and check and then recheck and make sure that you're working on what is actually going to help your throwing or help your lifting or help your basketball or whatever you may be training for.
Yeah, and there was something, I don't remember if it was a conversation with you, so it would have been 10 or 15 years ago now, or with Nate and getting information secondhand from you, but he had talked about finding these different indicators towards the success. And if you wanted to improve your PR on the shot put by 2%, we need to improve these 5 or 10 other factors by 2%. And that always stuck with me, and I've used it with powerlifters and everything, because I tell putting 2% on your PR on the shot put can seem really daunting.
Yeah.
That's 20 centimeters or something, or a meter, and it seems overwhelming. But to improve 2% in the bench press and 2% in the squat and the overhead back and whatever it is, seems much more attainable and kind of measurable. What is some advice you could offer as far as a process of finding what those indicators could be for an athlete?
I tell you, you really have to pay attention to the context of the whole situation. So, and I think you don't want to burrow in and get too hung up on exact numbers. Look at it as a general, look at more of trends. And I'll just give you one example of this. When I was working with Koji Morifushi back in 2008 and we're practicing, Koji liked to just do the practice and not really talk during practice, but we'd film everything. He'd take 30, 35 throws. And then afterward, he'd go, okay, now let's talk about practice. And you see a lot of coach athletes, they'll throw a little bit, stop, break it up. Okay, you're doing this, adjust this. And Koji said, if you read a book, if we're going to read a book and analyze it, you read the book and I read the book. We don't read a sentence and then talk about it and read a sentence and talk about it. We read the whole book, then the book club gets together and then we talk about what happened. So let the practice happen. Then when it's done, let's sit down and talk about what happened. And I was like, wow, that's pretty interesting. That actually makes sense because you're constantly disrupting the flow of the practice by micromanaging every couple throws or so. But with the process, going back to, set up some indicators, set up a workout for a week, 2 weeks, or 3 weeks, maybe in the fall at the beginning of the year, when you don't have any competitions, you're not trying to get ready for a performance, but put together something and just sit back and let it happen. If it's not going well, as long as it's not going to be detrimental, let it go poorly for a little bit more so you can see really why it's going poorly. And then if it's going great, let it go for a little while and really try to assess why it's going great. Then you're going to start to see the answers about what's important or not important. If you're seeing things start to go wrong right away and then you try to fix them and adjust them, maybe they get better, maybe they get worse. But if you try to interject and try to fix them, maybe your intervention helped, but then maybe it didn't. So maybe let it go for a bit. Train for 2 or 3 weeks, pay attention. Don't try to fix things. Just see where it takes you and then make your assessment. I think people jump in a little bit too early and end up changing things all the time instead of really letting things play out to see if it's really going to be useful or not. And I did not used to be like that at all, but I'm very much like that now because I kind of realized, as a coach, you want to try to make everything perfect all the time, but that's really not how people get better. You really learn from your mistakes a lot of times. So give yourself time to make mistakes and go, well, that test definitely ain't going to work. That's out, And I know it's a little bit of a nebulous concept there, but I think the most efficient way of training probably lies in that concept a little bit more, is let things go a little bit more if you can. Now, if you've got the week leading up to a meet that's really important or something, or competition, that's not the time or place for that. But when you have some free time, meaning the off season, preseason, whatever, that's a good place to see how things go.
So getting into the psychology of successful throwing. Throwing is very much like weightlifting and powerlifting, in the sense that it's got to be some of the highest ratio of time spent training to time spent performing.
Yeah.
You go to a track meet and you get 6 throws, which takes all of about 10 seconds total, and you trained for weeks and months and years for 10 seconds of work. Really, 6 second, 1 second, 1.5 second efforts. Are there any, visualization, mental exercise, or anything you encourage your throwers to do to help them prepare for that?
Man, there's all kinds of things there. I will say this: I'm a big believer, though, in visualization, and it's nice to be able to see yourself doing what you want to do. Can you step into the ring and just look out into the sector before you throw, and can you see yourself unloading on a big throw and making it go out there and seeing it land at 22 meters or whatever your goal happens to be? If you have a hard time visualizing that in the head, I don't know, it's going to be very tough to do it in real life. So I do think visualization, not just necessarily before you throw, but even doing a whole practice session, mental reps in your head when you're back at your house or your dorm or whatever, just take an hour to kind of go through a whole competition in your head.
Yeah, Reese was talking about how he trained as very low frequency, low volume training, but really high volume of drills.
Yeah.
And, he was just always doing the drills. And I remember being in high school, and standing in the kitchen talking to my mom and kind of like working my right foot. Or Nate was a bit further, that he was doing like we'd be walking up and down the streets in Berkeley, and he's doing South Africans, on the sidewalk.
Yeah.
And like mid-sentence, he's going to say half of a sentence and then do a South African and finish his thought. But with those kind of reps, whether physical reps or just mental reps, you can add thousands and thousands of reps that way.
Yeah, and you think about it, it's a lot like golf. If you can't see yourself making the shot, how is it going to happen? It's just it's just like dumb luck at that point, I think. So whether it's a physical rep or a mental rep, I think they're all important. So I think this is one of the base key principles right there. In all my years, I've been coaching 35 years now. It's been a long time. Execution's usually, when a person doesn't meet their expectations in a competition, it's usually execution. It's not lack of horsepower or whatever. It's usually whatever they're capable of, they just didn't execute that well that day, and that's why they fell short. And so being able to execute when you need it is really, really important. Like I said, being able to walk down the street, having a conversation, then just go into a couple South Africans. I'm sure when Nate was doing that, he really wasn't thinking about it too much when he did it. He can just do it, and it just happens.
Mm-hmm.
So, and he was obviously a very good technician from a very young age, so that stuff comes easy. But if you're going to be at the top of your game and whatever you're doing, you have to be able to do stuff like that without even thinking.
To shift gears a little bit, you've been involved in throwing as a coach for 35 years, as an athlete for probably a decade.
Probably a decade or so, yeah.
So, coming up on almost 50 years involved in the throws, and seeing changes, in the world scene with throwing in the U.S. I've always thought that there are a lot of parallels between the U.S.'s struggles in weightlifting on the international level, as well as the non-shot put throwing events. So the discus, the hammer, and the javelin. Do you see with changes in WADA and all that kind of stuff, or what do you think the things that need to happen for the U.S. to be more successful in those other events are?
Well, I was actually having a conversation today about this. I want to try to put this as succinctly as possible. Is throwing the throwing events? There's 4 throwing disciplines. They are embedded within all the other sports of track and field. So you get 21 events. You got 4 throwing events outdoors, and so the governing body and the way things are done. It's pretty much through the governing body and our school system in the United States, which you look at the college system, the high school system, that is our development system. And with the money that NCAA has there's a lot of support, and the best facilities in the country are all on college campuses. So there's a certain hierarchy and a certain system set up for track and field, of which throws are a part. The throws take a long time to develop. When you're 18 years old, as I'm quoting a study from the Czech Republic back in 2005, when you're 18 years old, a future world-class discus thrower, when they're 18 years old, does 64% of what they're ultimately going to be able to do when they're at their very best distance-wise. A sprinter, a 100-meter sprinter at the same age does 91% of what they're going to do. They're a lot closer. When you're 64%, you're pretty far away from what you're ultimately going to be. And so it's hard to see yourself going, I'm definitely going to be world class. When you're at 91, 92%, 10-2, 10 flat's not that far off. You can see it there. So at 18 years old, you're coming into the well-funded development system. There's a built-in institutional bias for early developing events. Throwing's late blooming events. Throwers, they keep on developing all the way up until age 28, 29, and 30 in most cases. Lance Deal threw his ultimate PR on the hammer at age 35. Now, he started the hammer a little bit late, seriously. He started after college. So the development period for the throws is much later than most of the other events, but the system's set up to take care of the early developing throws. Therein lies the problem. The window that we need for support happens too late. It's like, oh, you don't have it? Goodbye, see you later. So when you're throwing 22 meters at age 22, you're set, you're good. But you're throwing 82 meters in the javelin, you still need 7 more meters to make it. And usually you're out of the sport by age 24 or 25.
I would think that the problem kind of gets exacerbated by, what college coaches are paid to do.
Yeah.
Which is score points at conference. And,
short-term gain.
Yeah. And the fastest way to get a hammer thrower to throw, 66 meters or something that's going to score some points at conference is just, let's get them strong as we can, as fast as we can, which probably ultimately hinders their ability to one day throw 80 meters.
At the top end, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you sell out long-term gains for short-term.
Yeah. I always thought that was interesting. And then, Reese is probably unique in that he went from his high school coach to you and you for the rest of his career, where it wouldn't be unusual for a lot of these guys to go through 1 or 2 coaches in high school, 1 to 3 coaches in college, and then 1, 2, 3 coaches in their post-collegiate career, and there's no continuity to a system there that in throws and weightlifting, whatever they talk about, Soviet system or Chinese system for weightlifting, and even though some of that's a bit of a misnomer, and it's a snapshot of a part of their training or one camp in it. There's really no American system in any of these.
No. We're a big country. I mean, we're really
China's pretty big too.
China's pretty big too, but they're very centralized.
Yeah.
And their system's very. They don't do clinics. There's no. Your business model, what you do, doesn't exist in China, and there's a lot of other guys doing what you do, which is great. That doesn't happen in China. You're all on the same team at the national team. Yeah,
communism, while not great for many things, is great for lifting a lot and throwing things far.
Yeah, there's certain things that you can package into that box and just put a lot of work in. And the other thing, too, is you break one, just plug the next one in. I was talking to our diving coach here at UGA. He's he just retired, but he's one of the top Olympic coaches. And I asked him, I said, why are the Chinese divers so good? And he goes, well, you each get 2 divers at the Olympics. He goes, the United States, we got 3 great divers for 2 spots. The Chinese have 19 great divers for 2 spots. One breaks, gets injured, you plug the next one in. He gets injured, you plug the next one in. Endless supply. But 320 million people, we do have, and even though football and basketball and baseball and hockey and everybody else gets lots of talent from it, there's still a lot of talent to go around. So we are able to be good in some areas, but the long-term development stuff, especially like hammer, where you're just not going to be winning a medal usually at age 19 or 20, it's really very rare. Usually the medal winners are 30 years old on average. That person has no chance to develop given our system or lack thereof. So, but we do have enough different shot put systems. There's about 6 or 7 different defined systems, quote unquote, and they all work. They all produce good people. But it's if we weren't as big a country, we'd have maybe 1, and that's it, instead of 6.
Yeah, I did a podcast about this a couple of weeks ago, and you mentioned football and basketball and stuff taking talent. If you had to pick someone from outside of the throwing events that you wish you could see, you wish you could have turned into a shot putter, who would that have been?
I was just thinking about this the other day. I'd be very interested to see what a guy like J.J. Watt, for example, would do in the shot or maybe the discus or something like that.
Nate had mentioned to me for the discus one time when you were at the Olympics, you saw Dwight Howard, that you'd made a comment about him in the discus. Yeah,
this Dwight Howard, Dwight Howard would be real interesting. Maybe he'd just stand through. He's kind of a rangy guy, so that right foot would be in the back half of the ring. I'm trying to. There's so many good candidates. Like I said, I think of the guys like, if you remember Joe Thomas, who was Big Ten shot put champion, and then he went on to become obviously many-time All-Pro lineman. What if he'd stayed with a shot and really been serious about it? Or Brian Robinson, another one too from Texas.
Yeah, Vince Wilfork, ACC champ. Yeah, Jonathan Ogden.
Actually, Wilfork was one. He was a 67-7 shot putter in college, and I remember I called his coach up to recruit him, and he's like, "No, he's going to Miami." I'm like, "Okay." This is when Miami was really good, football. So, but yeah, he's a great example of, like, you want to talk about a really quick glider, but he had a little bit of mass behind that shot too.
More than a little.
He could have done some real damage, I think, if he stuck with the sport. So
yeah, and as a great throws historian and someone who loves the numbers, I just fire off a couple of these if you can. The most impressive jumping feat you've seen from a thrower?
I could almost show you the video. Chuck from Purdue. We were at Region.
Do you know how to say his last name?
It begins with the E, ends with the I.
Yeah.
In a Chukwe, something like that.
Yeah, I think that sounds about right.
Yeah. We just call him Chuck. Yeah. And everybody knows what we're talking about. And sorry about that if you're listening. But we were at Region a few years ago. It was his senior year, I believe. And we were in the weight room after the hammer was done, but before the shot. And there was a box. It was about 40-inch box. He just kind of strolls over to it and just levitates up onto the box. I wouldn't say jump because it didn't look like he tried to do anything. He just levitated. But when he took off and jumped, obviously when he left the ground, his legs were fully extended, and they just stayed in extended position until they landed on top. And I saw that, and I said, "Hey, would you mind doing that again? I got to get some video." And I told him, I said, in any of my seminars when I'm talking about box jumps, this is what you want to make it look like. Completely effortless. So this wasn't a case of, he did, you see guys stacking up 72 inches and they somehow get up there and lift their legs up above their ears to get on there. He did 40 inches, the easiest I've ever seen. When I show people the video, they're just like, just shake their head.
Can you corroborate this jumping story one way or the other? CJ Hunter, it was like, I've heard onto a 3-foot high box from 8 feet away. I've heard that it was like a 50-inch box from 6 feet away. You know the story?
I've heard the story before, and I want to say it was like 50 inches, 6 feet away. It was something pretty incredible. Which, with those stories, everybody always adds on 10% length, 10% height. I'll give you a C.J. Hunter story, though. In 1998, I was in Finland with him. And we were in Turku, Finland for a meet, and Brian Blutrick was his coach, was on a honeymoon, actually, and they went up to the Javelin Carnival a couple days early. So I was kind of with CJ, almost his liaison in Finland, and I knew all the club coaches in Finland there, so he wanted to get a weight workout in. So we go over and go to the gym. And I'm still in pretty good shape at the time and been doing some lifting. And he starts doing the kneader press, So he puts on 135, does a set of 3, puts on 220, and then I don't do a kneader press, I do a push jerk. So then he puts on 225, and he does a set of 3, and I go up, and I'm a pretty good push jerker for my build, so I do a set of 3. He puts on 2 more plates to get it 315, and then 10s on each side, and does 335 kneader press. So easy.
And for the kneader press, for the uninitiated, is like a rhythmic standing incline jerk.
Incline jerk, 45 degrees, not straight up ahead. Yeah. So, like I said, I was just trying to hang through 225 for sets, straight up. So he puts on 335 and does 3 like no problem. He's like, Don, you want this on? I'm like, that's just a little less than my squat max right there at the time. So I kind of said, no, I'm out, I'm done. So
what about a squatting or benching effort that really stands out to you among a thrower?
I'll just tell you a personal story. It's pretty fantastic. My freshman year at UCLA, I'm a walk-on javelin thrower. John Brenner, who was the alpha male bell cow of our throwing group, he's going to squat 733 it was. So he's going to do a big single, and we all go in the weight room. The whole throwing crew goes up there, and Coach Venegas is there, and we're all just jacked up. And I mean, it's 733, and again, I'm a 185-pound freshman, so I haven't seen this type of iron move. And it's already just, the bar's sagging, kind of bouncing, just sitting there. So he goes in, he puts his lifting suit on, and Bill Green, another American record holder who can clean 180, Bill Green's strong. He's got one side. Dave Wilson, who's a very strong guy, has got the back side, and I got the other side. The freshman javelin thrower. And I'm thinking, this is like how is this crew letting me be the spot there? But he goes, Brenner, he's the man. He's going to get this. So he goes up there, and I remember just looking at his back. His back seemed about like 2 acres wide. The bar is over his back, and it's just bouncing, and the iron's just bending. And I'm just going, God, please get this. Like, if he misses, like, what am I going to do? And 733, it's about a little over 2 feet of iron in the plates. So I'm just trying to think how I'm going to hold this up. Well, he goes down, just buries it, and comes right back up, no problem. And everybody goes crazy. I was the most relieved guy in the place. But I was just sitting there looking, and this is just, that's a big lift for anybody. Obviously, there's people lifting bigger than that, but like to see that up close at a young age, that's still to me, was one of the most fantastic things right there. And
any Olympic lifting feat among a thrower that really stands out in your mind?
I've seen some heavy lifts, but one thing, kind of like Chuck's vertical jump, when I was at the Olympics in 2004, Robert Fazekas in the Discus, who ended up winning and then ended up not winning, but he was at the height of his powers. I was at the warm-up track one day. His sun's going down, hardly anybody's there. I'm in the weight room. I had 8 throwers there, so I was out there all day coaching. So I just stayed there, and I was getting a little lift in afterwards.
8 people that won Olympics.
8 people, in the 2004 Olympics.
Good.
So it was a busy 2 weeks. So I remember at the end of the day, I'm lifting, just getting my own personal lift in, which is more like a Richard Simmons bodybuilding workout than anything at the time. And Fazekas comes in, and I'm like, oh, interesting. This guy's supposed to snatch 375, and he sure looks like it. He puts on 60K, just bam, 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 does like 4 in a row in about 4 seconds. And then he puts on a couple more 20, so it's 100K. 1, 2, 3. I think he did 4 in a row in literally about 4 seconds from a hang. It was like he was doing the bar.
Yeah.
And then he went to do one more, and I videotaped it. But I asked him before if I could videotape it, and he said, yeah, and I videotaped it. So I have it on tape, but it's like on VHS somewhere buried in my office. I got to transpose it over before it disintegrates. But that wasn't a max lift, I've never seen anybody do 100K like it was literally the bar.
Yeah. I know that summer before those Olympics, Nate had been at Zombote, him and Boldy.
Yeah.
And he spent time with Fazekas and Adrian Anush, and he said that Fazekas had apparently done like a 240 clean or something like that.
Yeah, he had something.
Yeah, that's just unbelievable numbers. Well, Don, thank you so much for taking the time.
Sure
It's
thing.
a pleasure to catch up with you. Listen to The Jug Life. Go on iTunes. Give us a 5-star review. Write us something funny or nice. I always appreciate that. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you're interested in online coaching, jtsstrength.com. Check out our powerlifting and power building AI programs, helping thousands of athletes with totally customized programming for less than $1 a day. So go check those out. If you want to throw really far and you're a high school, or this might be tampering or something, go to the University of Georgia. Yeah, you didn't say it, I did. So it's all right. So thank you so much, Don, for taking the time.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.